Hello and welcome to yet another session of the Godfred Yaka channel. Today we would be looking at how to set up an Active Directory service on our Windows server. Remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos. Now, it's assumed that you are a network administrator and you are required to put all computers on your network under one umbrella so that you can effect policies to users and computers on the network and also control things such as storage and then other activities users run on your network. The best way to do this is to implement an Active Directory service where you would have all the computers enrolled to one domain, such that if you effect a change to all computers, they would all inherit it and then behave accordingly. So the Active Directory or Active Directory is a heart of a Windows Server operating like system. Now it's simply a domain service that is deployed, and then it's a central repository or a central place or a container that allows for objects such as user accounts, computer accounts, group policies, and so on to dwell and then pick directives from. Now, this particular service can be deployed either by using what is called the server roles feature. It's a console that allows you to install server roles, or we could use the Windows PowerShell, that is a command prompt. The PowerShell is a kernel or a shell that is embedded in Windows server applications that allow for you to deploy services using commands. Now, there are a few components you need to consider when deploying an Active Directory service. One is the domain controller. The DC or the domain controller, it's a role that allows or stores copies of the Active Directory database. So it's that role you enable that allows you to store or to keep. You create a database that accepts all policies or that accepts all services deployed in the Active Directory system. Then there is the data store. So this is the actual file that after creating a domain controller, it is generated. So it is the ntds.dit. So it stores every Active Directory information. Then of course we should have a domain. So the domain is a group of computers and user accounts that share common administration within a central Active Directory database. Then we have the forest. Usually within an Active Directory service, we have this common location that every computer or every domain is pushed to, because the domain is a collection of group of computers. So if this group of computers are deployed or run particular services or similar services, they are grouped under one particular place called the forest. So usually the first group of domains that are put together to create a forest in your domain is called the root domain, but we can have more than one forest in one domain. And of course, as the name derives, the forest, there is something called the tree. So a tree is simply a collection of domain names that share a common root domain. So if they are all deployed in one particular root domain, there are trees within that particular domain. Then there is the schema. Those who are abreast with database systems should know what a schema is. It's the list of attributes or properties of maybe object types or maybe Active Directory object types. The schema is simply the set of policies or the set of rules that control a specific database. Then there are organizational units, which are simple containers or folders in the Active Directory. Then there are sites. So the site is an object that represents physical locations. Sites are configured for proper replication of Active Directory database between like other sites. Then there is a partition. It's a file made up of multiple partitions, which or like contains or is called the naming context. So the Active Directory database consists of partitions such as application, schema, configuration, domain, and then the global catalog. Now the checklist, once you are aware of the components you need in an Active Directory service, you also need to be very sure that these three main things are standard. One is the host name, the server host name. You should choose a suitable host name for your service. Probably it's a business setup for, say, sales of items, or maybe a school or a hospital. So you would probably want to gear your host name towards initials of that particular institution or that particular firm you are setting it up to. For our case, we have just made it DC001 as our server host name. Then the IP address. An Active Directory service server shouldn't be deployed using a dynamic IP address. You should define a static IP address to it. And this particular static IP address you are defining to it shouldn't be an IP address you get to change frequently. So you should work on your network IP system. Maybe if there is a different person handling your IP pool, your routing activities, you should liaise with that particular person. Or if it is you and you are deploying DHCP on your service, you should exclude IP addresses that are deployed on Active Directory servers, such that you assign them manually. Then there is the domain name. Now, the domain name is sometimes very complex. Microsoft recommends that you use different domain names for internal domains, internal DNS systems, such that it doesn't conflict or it doesn't have issues with your external domain. So for this particular purpose, we would be choosing something like the DC001 for our Active Directory service. Now, we would skip right to our server interface. For the purpose of this training, I deployed a server operating system with using Hyper-V. So we power on our computer. I connect to my computer and then I turn it on. So it would turn on my server operating system right now. Just some few seconds, it will get up to speed for us to start. So now that it is up and running, I log in. Good. So I could, at least I'm just scaling it a bit, or I could make it full screen so that we get the feel of the whole system. Now, automatically, when your server operating system starts, in most cases, it launches the server manager. From this particular console, if it doesn't launch it too, you can start it from here. So you start the server manager. From this particular console, we can add rules and features where we would be adding our Active Directory service, or we could come to manage and then we select add rules and features. It's the same thing, it leads to the same place. So once we are here, what we do is we go next. Then it is a role-based or feature-based installation. We are not doing this based on a remote service or something. So we are basing on this particular module and then we go next. If there are different servers that are listed within the pool, you choose which one you would want to deploy the Active Directory service on. So in our case, we have just one server. So we choose that server and then we go next. So mind you, I have already assigned the IP address I showed you from the beginning. You saw the 10.52.52.195/24 means a class C IP. So that is the computer I am dealing with. Then I go next. And then I take the Active Directory domain service. So Windows Microsoft automatically or products is programmed such that it's smart. It allows for you to add the basic features you need, unless of all you want some specific applications. Now, in most cases, it will be good for you to install the DNS alongside, but we could also install the Active Directory service and then after that we install the DNS. But it is recommended that we install the DNS service alongside our Active Directory service so that it will help for name resolution and the like for us. So we go next and then it goes through and ensures that everything is in play. Then we click on install. So once we click on install, we give it some few seconds depending on your server speed, your computer speed. So we give it some time. So right now the server Active Directory service is installed, but it's not configured until we promote the server. So you can see from here, there is promote this server to a domain controller. So until we promote it to be a domain controller, we won't have the field of the domain services we would want to use. Of course, we could close this and do that later, or we could just say, I could close this, and then I would come to where it is flagged. Then I would realize that there is a service that is not completed. So I choose promote this server. In previous versions, you would just go to run and then you type DC promo, which would do your work for you. But in newer versions of server operating system, we need to follow this particular view. Now that it is here, what do we do? It is asking us if we want to connect to an existing domain. But in our case, we don't have any domain. This is the root domain. This is the first domain we are setting up. So we would tell this thing that it is what? Like we are not adding to any new domain. So we are creating a new forest. So we are creating a new forest. Now, if we choose maybe add a new domain to an existing forest, you would have to browse through to or you enter the credentials of whichever existing service you want to enroll this particular server to. So in our case, we choose add new forest, then it asks us of what? Our root domain name. So I want to say it's dc dash maybe 001 dot say local, right? So I just want to maintain this as my root domain name, and then I go next. Then now, because this is the root, automatically it makes it the global catalog. So we can't change this particular service. But if we had chosen the option to add it to an existing domain, we would probably maybe not have this one being the global catalog, because maybe that particular computer would have been the global catalog. So now we set the password for our directory service restore mode password. So in case we ever want to restore our directory service, we'll be required to enter an authentication, or we'll be required to authenticate. So we enter a password to that effect. Now, another thing you should be mindful of is the functional level of your forest. You realize that automatically is Windows Server 2012 R2, but you could also make it compatible to maybe Windows Server 2008 or 2008 R2 if you have operating systems or if you have other servers that are using previous policies or previous setups. But in our case, everything is based on the Windows Server 2012 architecture or the newer version. So we just leave it like that and then we go next. But if you have previous or old server setups on your network facility, it will be prudent to choose a functional level that will be compatible with those particular systems. Otherwise, you cannot enroll them onto your domain. So we choose our password, our restore mode password, and then we go next. Then it is asking us to specify maybe a DNS delegation option, but I told you we could install the DNS afterwards, so we can leave this particular option and then we go next, so that we would install our DNS server later on. So we choose a NetBIOS name for our system. It's taking some time to load. Automatically it has chosen maybe DC-0010. That is the NetBIOS name for our network. Then we go next. Actually, most of these things are just next, but it's the concept that matters. Now, one important thing you should be looking at is the path, the database folder. Where should it store the ntds.dit file? That system volume file, the one that contains our domain controller information. All policies, all attributes, properties are going to be saved to this particular database file. So it will be best if we have a network attached storage device, or we have our drive partitioned in two. Maybe it will be prudent that we change the path of this particular file, because it is a very serious database file and you wouldn't want to lose it if something happens to your operating system if your operating system crashes. So it will be best for us to keep it in another location. So if you have another location, you could possibly browse and then you dump it there so that you are safe. But in our case, we don't have any partition. For training purposes, I just maintain the drive C. Then we go next. Now Windows selects the things or the features your domain controller is going to contain. If everything is up to task, then we go next and then we allow it to do its prerequisite checks. If there is something lacking, it would probably automatically install it, or it will recommend for you to install it afterwards. But as it stands, it's doing a simple background check and everything is probably okay for us. So we click on what? Install. If something is not okay for us, we probably go back, validate it, and then we go next. But in this case, we are okay with whatever we see here. So we click on install. Then we now give it the time to complete the installation and then we proceed from there. Thank you. So once the installation is done, it would request or require that we restart our operating system so that all the activities would be installed well. So we give it some time to restart and then okay, so after rebooting, you realize that my login screen has changed, or my logon screen has changed. Now there is the NetBIOS name here, the DC-0010 is here, /administrator. So that means if I am logging on, I am logging on to the domain that has been created. But the previous logon screen just had administrator there. There wasn't any maybe domain name, or there wasn't any name here /administrator. But this is to prove that my domain controller has been installed. So I simply enter my password to complete my installation. So as it stands now, this server is now a domain controller. So you can then open your server manager, or you can go to the console of the Active Directory service and then you configure other options of your forest and then your domain. And then you can do that by going to tools. So we expect to find, oops, my server is still running. Let's just give it some time to be ready for us to navigate through. Okay, so it is ready, and then we go to tools, and under tools we expect to find services of Active Directory service that is now installed. So we can use the consoles available for our further configuration. So if I want to open the Active Directory Administrative Center, I simply click on this particular console. Then it opens the Active Directory Configuration Center. So you realize that my server manager dashboard now has the Active Directory service installed on, and then it has the DNS service installed. But previously it was just the local server, file storage, and then all service. But now we have the DNS and then the ADDS also installed on. So now if my console is ready, I should have it here. That allows for me to go through to do my necessary changes, which we'll be doing or we'll be handling in other videos. So I could open the domain computers and trust. Then if I have enrolled computers and other stuff on my domain, I should expect to find some of them and so on and so forth. But for the purpose of this video, it is just to help us understand how to install the Active Directory service. And in the next video, we would see how to configure DNS options and other stuff, such that other computers will take policy effects from our domain controller. Thank you for watching, and do remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos. Bye.